So a big thing is I want you to be gentle. If you're hearing this and it's like this light bulb went off and you're like, holy F, I have been treating myself so poorly and I've been practicing self-care wrong. Take a deep breath, be gentle with yourself. You were today years old when you learned this, and give yourself permission to shift it slowly. Don't make yourself wrong. You didn't know any better. It's not all your fault. However, it is your fault if you hear this, it resonates with you, and then you just continue living your life the same way. Then you can't use this excuse any longer. You can't blame anyone but you.
My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Today, we're welcoming an incredibly special guest, Paul Fishman. Paul Fishman is the host of the Top 100 podcast, The Road to Self-Love, and creator of the Self-Love Diet, a 6-month transformative program that teaches you how to say yes to yourself, ditch the people-pleasing, and live the life you've always wanted, which we are huge fans of at The Good Space. His mission is simple: to empower and inspire a sense of belonging in each of us. Paul has been lauded for creating brave space, building a fiercely dedicated community, and helping thousands of humans love themselves unconditionally. If you spend even 2 seconds on his Instagram, you will know that his energy is just so hopeful and positive and real. And it's just, you can draw so much love from his page. So Paul, thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just a joy to be in the good space.
Yes, I'm so excited. I know when Jessica on my team introduced me to you, and as soon as I just saw what you were about, it was like an immediate yes. Like I felt like you are doing so much good in the world and just being an example, as well as sharing your tips with people on how to have better self-love. And the thing I love about what you're doing is that you don't just stay on the surface. You really dive deep. You talk about trauma. You talk about your struggles. Like you really make this a real thing. Whereas some people will, just talk about habits or things that help you avoid it. But you're about like, okay, let's get to the root of this. Let's not avoid and let's heal through it. So I really appreciate that about you.
Thank you. I received that appreciation. It's definitely something that I wouldn't have any other way. I've always well, that's not true. For the first 25 years of my life, I was not very vulnerable. I wasn't my authentic self. I didn't really share anything that I truly wanted to share about myself. So I feel like after that dark period of my life where I was literally just living my life, trying to achieve the expectations that I thought other people had for me, not necessarily even the expectations that they did have for me, but ones that there were stories that I was telling myself about what I had to do as a human in this world to make other people happy and proud. Because of that journey through that darkness, which in retrospect, it was very, very dark because I wasn't being authentically me, I realized that I just couldn't live like that anymore. And I might have gotten a little too carried away with sharing all the ins and outs of me. I was enmeshed with the entire world. There were no boundaries, but it really, I've kind of course corrected now, but I think that it's really important to humanize oneself, especially if you're putting yourself in as a leader in a space or being put on a pedestal, even though I don't believe that we need to put people on pedestals, because eventually that means either they're going to get knocked down or it makes you feel less than if you're putting someone on a pedestal. I'm just grateful that people are willing to hear my story, and I just love teaching and inspiring through story.
It's great. And you have such an easygoing yet fun energy. So I feel like it's very easy for people to want to learn that from you and to be on the journey with you. So would you be comfortable sharing a little more about your story, about what drew you to working in self-love? Because I know that's a huge transformation that you made.
Sure. Well, you and I before were talking about, you live in New York and I used to live in New York. And New York was kind of the place where I hit rock bottom, didn't think I could go any further, and then went even further down the rabbit hole of rock bottomness. And at the real core of my journey, I was 75 pounds overweight. I was working at a job that didn't inspire me, that was really, really easy and just comfortable. And I didn't feel valued there. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship with a woman. I wasn't really aligned with my truth as a gay man. So there was all of these parts of me that I was hiding. And I really felt like I deserved the kind of treatment that I was receiving in that relationship. And I was also, because of this, in this self-soothing and sabotaging cycle of emotionally eating and then feeling bad about it and going out and buying really expensive shoes because shoes always fit, so I didn't have to worry about it. And then feeling irresponsible for spending all this money on a pair of shoes and then soothing myself by eating. And that's how I was overweight. And that's also how I was in financial crisis in New York. So all of these things kind of like piled on my shoulders, literally forced me to the ground. And there was one day in particular, I remember my girlfriend at the time, she had gone to work and it was my day off. I worked retail and I woke up and I couldn't get myself out of bed. And when I got out of bed, I fell to the floor crying because I didn't know who I was. And I didn't understand why I was so unhappy. Like, yes, there were these pillars in my life that were out of whack, but like on paper, I should be happy. And this is a big thing for me. I was always saying, you should be happy. Why aren't you? You should be happy. And the reality is that that word should in itself, if it shows up in a statement, for me at least, should is such a shame word. It's inflicting so much shame. It also creates a lot of excuse because I should be happy, but I'm not. Okay, well, I'll be happy tomorrow. So I decided at that moment that I was going to search for what made me happy. And the first thing that I knew that I had to do is I had to leave that relationship, which I had left previously. Like, this relationship was not healthy at all. And we were definitely in a trauma bond. We were definitely connected to each other. She was connected to the fact that I wasn't being honest and I wasn't being true to me, and which wasn't allowing her to trust her own intuition and, allow her to stay in that codependent relationship. And for me, I was used to being beat up emotionally because that was my childhood. So I thought that that's what love was. So within this cycle, I really had to break free of that. And I didn't know any of these things that I'm sharing with you. It was just like survival. Like, I felt like I was going to die if I stayed in that relationship any longer. So the second I left that relationship, then, the next step was coming out. So I came out kind of like rainbow flag blazing and just, at the age of 25, like really took in the city and everything that it had. And then I found a place, I spent almost 3 months couch surfing because I didn't think it was okay for me to leave the home that we lived in and not pay my portion of the rent, especially in New York. So I'm grateful for all of my friends that allowed me to sleep on their couches while I still paid for rent, but didn't live in that home. And then when I was able to find a space to live, I moved in with a community of people that just didn't ask me to be anything other than myself. And that was something that I had never experienced in my life before. People just being like, we just want you to be you. And I'm like, but who is that? And if you're listening to this and you can relate to this story, know that, like, A, you're not alone. B, it's okay. It's not wrong to not know who you are. A lot of us are conditioned to believe that success and having a family and, the corporate careers, or even now there's all this like noise about being an entrepreneur and working for yourself. Like, if you aren't fitting into this box of what society tells you is happiness, that's okay. Like, you matter most, and there's nothing wrong with you figuring things out either, right? Like, I think a big thing that we also need to give ourselves permission for is evolution. Give yourself permission to evolve. Give yourself permission to change, right? Francesca and I both used to be in the music industry, and we both used to have dreams to be, sixth members of bands, and
yes,
the Spice Girls and me in sync.
Exactly.
So it's like, And granted, like we might not be on that same path anymore, but it's like if I was still at 37, like trying to be in sync, granted they haven't been together forever, like I'd be like, hey, Paul, maybe it's time to move on.
Wow, that was incredible. Just how you shared everything and just the learnings inside of that was really incredible. And like in that whole aspect, in that whole journey, what was your biggest surprise along the way?
My biggest, well, outside of me coming out and everyone being like, great, what's for dinner? And being like, oh my gosh, which I think is like, no, I can't generalize and say it, but it's a lot of people in the LGBTQIA plus community. Like when we come out, like everyone's just like, oh, we were waiting for you to come out, or it's not as big a deal. And we realize that, like, especially I'm grateful now, I see younger generations, I'm a geriatric millennial, so at the top of the millennial pillar, but like the Gen Z and the younger millennials, like it's not as big a deal. And at least from my perspective, but I know that there are lots of places where it is still really, really hard. So that was one big thing that was like, oh, okay, that I really wish that I hadn't waited so long. Because there were times when I knew in high school, but I was like, no, I'm going to wait until my parents die before I come out. Like, I just don't want to do that to them. Like my dad really, and my mom really, really wanted grandchildren. And I didn't really see a way to bring that to them as in a same-sex relationship. And granted, there are so many ways we can. Grant, it's very expensive. Like there's no easy way around it. But ultimately, that was just a big thing for me, that I learned that other people's opinions of you or other people's expectations of you are the worst reason to make a decision.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you like the pain of staying in that space where those expectations is what kind of made your decisions and ruled your life. That pain probably was just more than just changing and like being like, I need to start, I need to figure this out and actually love myself more and figure out who I am. And I think that's powerful and that's amazing. And that, each of us, you're not ready until you're ready kind of thing. And it was that moment you were just ready. And I think that's amazing. So if someone is new to the idea of self-love, how is that different from self-care or self-confidence?
Okay, so this is really, really great. And this is where a lot of people get confused. So let's break down what self-love is first so that you can have an understanding. And this is really my personal definition of self-love. However, it's also, if you receive it as your own definition, I think that's going to be really, really powerful. However, there's a little caveat to that. So the word self, if you look it up in the dictionary, means the individual. And the word love means devotion. So if you're operating from a place of self-love, you're operating from a place of the devotion to your individuality. What makes you special? What makes you the only you that you are on this entire planet? You were given specific gifts. You were given a specific path. And for you to not follow those things is a complete disregard to the love that you are worthy of having for yourself. And this is also my big argument when people say, well, isn't self-love selfish? And I personally believe that self-love is the most selfless thing that you can do. Because if you love yourself enough to actually honor the gifts that you were given, actually show up the way that you were supposed to and meant to show up in this world, you will then be able to help more people. You will then be able to guide more people. You will then be able to show up and empower and inspire more people to be their authentic selves as well. And really receive the beautiful gifts that you have. So that in itself is like why self-love is so important. And at the same time, because my definition of self-love is the devotion to your individuality. If you listen to this and you're just like, nope, that's not what self-love is for me. Great. I receive and accept that because you get to define what self-love is for you. Something that we do on my podcast is I ask every single guest, what does self-love mean to you? And I've interviewed over 100 people, and every single person's answer is never the same. So what I think is really cool about self-love is that you get to define what self-love is for you. You can sit here and listen to me, a self-love coach, and someone who's just fully immersed himself in the journey, and say, oh, that's Paul's right. But if it doesn't feel right for you, then screw me. I don't know anything about your journey. So that's what self-love is. And self-love is a mental and emotional act. It's something you do on the inside. Self-care, on the other hand, is a physical act. It's something you do for your body, something you do for your mental health. So self-care is something like going to the gym, going to get your hair done, getting your nails done, getting a massage, taking care of yourself via journaling or meditation. And the thing that a lot of people don't understand about self-care, especially because self-care has been glorified and glamorized by society and the media, oh, order this face serum, hashtag self-care, love yourself, and all this stuff. And the reality is that if you ordered that face serum and you're like, this is going to be for my self-care, great. If you are putting that face serum on your face, rubbing it in, and just gawking at yourself and making yourself wrong for spending X amount of dollars on the serum, you are counteracting the exact self-care that you are hoping will make you feel better. Whether this is spending all of your time while getting your hair done, worrying about the amount of money you're spending on it, getting a massage and just focusing on all of the emails you have to send after, going to the gym and feeling bad that you had to leave your partner at home with the kids. All of these things, these negative feelings, are impacting your self-care to a point where you might as well just not do the self-care. So what I like to say is that self-care without self-love is self-destructive. And I think it's really important to also give you a very easy solution. All you have to do during your self-care time is infuse gratitude into your self-care. I'm so grateful that I have the means to buy this face serum. I'm so grateful that I have a job that I can step away and I don't have to be on my email 24/7. I'm so grateful that I have a partner who's willing to watch the kids while I go to the gym. This is something, and it could just be something that's like, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Or another one that I have a lot of my clients say is, I am safe to take care of myself. I am safe to take care of myself. And this is something that, a whole journey in what we were talking about a little bit before. And you shared that, like, I really like to get to the depths and the deep parts of it. Is a lot of our lack of self-care and self-love was developed from the ages of 0 to 7 years old, where we witnessed our parents or people on TV not being in a relationship correctly or not taking care of themselves or whatever. And then we thought that that was right and true because someone outside of ourselves was doing it and they were living and breathing and glorified and glamorized. And here we are getting to unlearn all these things. So a big thing is I want you to be gentle. If you're hearing this and it's like this light bulb went off and you're like, holy F, I have been treating myself so poorly and I've been practicing self-care wrong. Take a deep breath, be gentle with yourself. You were today years old when you learned this, and give yourself permission to shift it slowly. Don't make yourself wrong. You didn't know any better. It's not all your fault. However, it is your fault if you hear this, it resonates with you, and then you just continue living your life the same way. Then you can't use this excuse any longer. You can't blame anyone but you.
I love that. And I love that you also, I just want to call out the fact that you said to be gentle and to let it happen over time. And it doesn't have to happen like in the snap of a finger. And you're right. It's an unlearning, right? You have to unlearn, and it's just moment by moment. And that's the core of like mindfulness and presence, is just moment to moment and just being here and like, doing the best you can. And as you keep going, it becomes a habit, and then your life starts to change, and it's like a snowball effect. So I really appreciate that call to, to just not putting that pressure for it to happen all at once. So in terms of self-love, I would love to hear your thoughts on the importance of boundaries or intentionally creating space for ourselves. Can you speak to boundaries a little bit?
Yes. So this word is thrown around all the time. You need better boundaries, set boundaries, 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 boundaries. Well, I have an inkling of a feeling that some of us, if not a lot of us listening or even having this conversation, don't even know how to set boundaries or really what a boundary even is. So I'm going to do us all a favor and I'm going to reframe boundaries in a way that I think is going to be really, really helpful. This is something that I've just put into practice and it has changed my life. So instead of thinking of a boundary as this like, oh, what is it? Like a fence that I put up around myself. I want you to think of a boundary as a standard in your life that you are upholding. The thing about boundaries is that a lot of times we expect other people to uphold our boundaries. And unfortunately, that's not going to work out in your best favor. What I ask you to do, like, let's think of an example that a boundary between kids and their parents, right? So, like, for instance, my parents, until very recently, felt like they were privy and deserved every tidbit of information about my life. And I was conditioned because I lived in a very enmeshed family and grew up and believed that that was how I was supposed to communicate with my parents. And it wasn't working for me because I wasn't able to be an independent thinker. I always was almost codependent on my parents approving what I was doing and getting their advice and journeying through that. So because of that, I wasn't able to truly live my life. So some other stuff went down and I realized that I needed to set a new standard with my parents, primarily my father. And I called him up and I said, Dad, I would like to set a new standard in our life where instead of us being parent child, we're peer to peer relationship. So, what that means for me is that all expectations are communicated, that I don't come to you for advice unless I'm asking for it, and that we share openly with each other if we feel called, and that there isn't this expectation that just because I'm your son, you get to know everything about my life. And the thing is that it's my job to uphold that standard. It's my job to communicate if dad falls off it or I mess up and say, hey, I realized that I, didn't ask for permission to share this thing with you. And I didn't see if you were in the right space to hear it. I apologize and want to move forward. So it kind of puts everything out there. So setting new standards feels really, really good because when we set boundaries, especially boundaries that are modeled by the media, we 9 times out of 10 see boundaries as an ultimatum. Like, I set a boundary once and this person has to follow it or they're done, they're over. And that's just not how life is going to successfully work. That's not how a relationship is going to successfully work. Your boundaries need to be continuously communicated and gently placed into a relationship to actually be withheld. Because just like you took forever to get the courage to set the boundary, the other person is going to take some time to accept this new boundary into their life. So expecting someone to do something at a more rapid pace than you is not only setting them up for success, I mean, it's for failure, but it's setting you up for failure as well. So that's why the standard brings the ownership back to you. And this is really the pillar of everything I do. Taking that finger that you're pointing out at everyone else and then turning it back at yourself and being like, what can I do differently? If the way you're thinking about boundaries isn't working anymore, then hey, reframe it as a standard. If you actually realize that you're just setting ultimatums with people and they keep on blowing up and you get angry and feeling let down and upset and alone, hey, it's an opportunity for you to do something different. It's time to stop blaming everyone else for your own problems. Another big quote that I always love to share, whom I don't know who it's by, it's not by me, is your trauma is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal it.
That's very powerful. And you're right. I love that you are like, it's understandable that these things can happen and that relationships, you always have to evolve or like you said, put those boundaries. But at the end of the day, it is your responsibility. And so what if someone is worried about disappointing or hurting or alienating a loved one if the needs are no longer about that person and it's more about like, okay, I'm trying to set these boundaries. Like, what would you suggest to someone who's nervous about that?
Yeah, so let's talk about worry. And really, what is worry? It's anxiety, because anxiety is worrying about things we can't control. And unfortunately, I know we all wish that we could control everyone else. Unfortunately, you can't control anyone. So the easiest and also the hardest thing to do, that is also going to be the most transformative, is to get out your journal and write out the worst thing that could happen. What's the worst thing that could happen if I sit down and set this standard with this person? They could reject me, they could get angry, they could get mad, they could feel all these types of things. Then when you actually write it down and you experience it, you can ask yourself, will this actually happen? Is this actually going to happen with this person? Are they going to get mad? Are they going to, ice me out of their life or whatever? And if it's a yes, then you have the opportunity to prepare yourself a little bit more for the situation. But if it's a no, then you can move into it with a little bit of peace, because you'll know that, oh, wait, that was just a story that I was telling myself. I was just over here writing the New York Times best-selling novel about worry and trauma that isn't really actually true. It's a novel, it's fiction. This is something that a lot of people are not going to want to do because it feels like a lot of work. It feels like a lot of work getting things that are living in our head onto paper. But there's so much magic, because when it's living in your head, you can blow it out of proportion. It can be so much bigger than it actually is. You might just need to go ask your partner if they're willing to walk the dog once a week, or wake up early and feed the dog once. And you're freaking out, being like, they're going to yell at me and say, I do so much, whatever it is. And then when you sit down and you're like, no, this is a perfectly feasible request. Like, this is doable. And then it will also prepare you in the way that you present it, which is, a whole nother conversation about how to present standards in a gentle manner, and also taking complete responsibility for your feelings and not projecting them onto the other person.
That's super important. And what you were describing earlier is what my therapist would call catastrophizing. That was something that I was so good at, because I've struggled with anxiety most of my life because my dad had massive anxiety all the time. So obviously I picked it up from him, but catastrophizing, that's exactly what I would do. I would think the worst case scenario, the worst thing's going to happen. And it really scared me. And thankfully I've gotten help on how to reel that in. And I love what you said about presenting it where based from your feeling and not projecting on someone else. So just really quickly, how would you have someone approach someone else in that gentle way without all those things you said?
Well, there's some really, really great tools that you can use. Now, here's the thing, Francesca, that I really struggle with. When it comes to communication, both people have to be on board to have a conversation, the kind of conversation I'm going to paint a picture of right now. If one person doesn't feel ready to have a conversation that is adult and not catastrophic and not explosive, this type of dialogue may not work. And this is where I don't have all the answers when you have someone who's really, really resistant, except continuing to try, and also releasing the need for them to change and just focusing on yourself. And this might mean that you have to leave. This might mean that you need to ask for, group counseling or something like that. Like, there are different scenarios where this might not work. So I just want to put that caveat. Also very hopeful that it will work. So big thing, owning your feelings, stepping into the situation, asking the other person first and foremost, hey, are you willing to sit down and have a conversation with me about something that I want to talk to you about? My favorite words, they are so magical. Are you willing? Because what you're doing is you're allowing the other person to say yes or no. And therefore they don't feel backed into a corner, like they have to have the conversation or else. They can say yes or no. So if they say yes, great. You can find a safe space to sit down. Another thing to know, do not have this conversation when you are hungry, when you are tired, when you are driving, when you are doing anything that you're stressed out about. Okay. So don't do that. Like abort mission and wait for you get some food in your belly and wait for you to get home. I swear my husband always brings up the toughest things while we're driving. And I'm like, no, we cannot talk about it. Then I just like take the bait and we're off to the races. And I'm like, crap. So if they're saying, no, I'm not willing, okay, this having this conversation is really important to me. When works for you? And if they're like, never works for me, okay, well then, that might not be the best thing. But if then they have the opportunity, hey, I'm not feeling the best right now. Can we do it later or tomorrow? Sure. Is there a specific time? Yeah, 2 p.m. Great. I will come and find you. So you're taking the responsibility on you to continue that conversation. So you are still in the driver's seat of this conversation. So then you sit down and you say, hey, I've been really scared, or I've been really anxious, or I've worried a lot about having this conversation because the story I'm telling myself is that you are going to react poorly or you're going to get mad at me. Is there any truth to that story? So what you're doing is A, you're naming how you're feeling so they understand you're getting vulnerable. B, you are sharing your deepest, darkest fears with them and asking them to validate whether it's true or not. And they're going to be like, no, of course not. I'm happy to have this conversation with you. I wouldn't have done it. And then something that I love to do that I learned from my therapist is that then you send an appreciation to the other person. Say, I really appreciate that you do X, Y, and Z, or that you are willing to have this conversation, or you take this relationship seriously enough that we can sit down and have this conversation. And then the next step is to just lay it all out and continue to own. Do not project. Do not make them wrong. Do not blame them. This is all you sharing what you need and want and crave. There's no need for you to be like, because you did this and you did that, because ultimately they know all of the bullshit that they did. They get it. We are, even the worst people know when they're the worst people.
I love that. And it's funny because when you had the caveat at the beginning about, okay, depending on your situation, it made me think about the book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson. Have you read that one yet or no?
Yeah.
Okay. That changed my world, because when you talk about enmeshment, like all these different kinds of attachments and like the effects of an emotionally immature parent, that as well, like learning the aspects of that really helped me to not only have compassion for my parents, but also to navigate things a little better. So I feel like if you feel like, whoa, I don't know if my parents or whoever can handle this, then maybe read something like that. Or like you said, go to therapy or something like that, but just like arm yourself with as much knowledge so that you can understand how to best handle it. So I really love what you shared.
I also have to share that if therapy or hiring a coach like myself doesn't feel within your financial means, TikTok is such a great resource to learn about these types of things.
Really? That's great.
Well, I mean, if you can go onto TikTok and type in like enmeshment or whatever, and there will be loads and loads of things. Granted, make sure you trust the person and that like it feels relatable. My TikTok has a lot. I focus mostly on dating and relationships over on TikTok because that's just what the algorithm pushed me into, and I'm here for it. So we talk a lot about communication style. We talk a lot about breaking codependency and becoming more interdependent in a relationship and not independent, just like finding that beautiful space where you can always communicate. And I do this fun series where I coach TV characters to paint pictures around like how to be different and why you are the way that you are. And there's lots of fun stuff over on TikTok.
That's great. I'm going to make sure I follow you after this because I love your content a lot. So, and actually, which is a perfect segue because between the self-love diet and the self-love show, you're consistently creating such wonderful and loving content. So is there anything that you're currently working on that you're especially excited about and want to share with us?
So, you've caught me at a really interesting time, Francesca, because to be like completely vulnerable and completely transparent, the past 12 months has been very, very hard for me. I've been growing through a physical ailment that has kind of brought me to my knees. And disease aside, it's taught me so much about giving yourself permission to evolve, following your truth. I've learned how to re-regulate my nervous system and all of the deep patterning that I was raised with that I thought was normal in relationship and friendship and everything. So at this very moment in time, I'm really just allowing myself to have fun again. When I started the self-love business in the middle of 2018, no one was talking about self-love. It wasn't as big as it is now, let alone there were no men talking about it. So my business catapulted, it skyrocketed very, very quickly. I had insane opportunities. My business was thriving. And now I've lost momentum. And I'm sharing this very vulnerably because I'm in this like kind of rediscovery of who I am and what I want to do. And I'm just having fun right now. I've committed to not putting out any way to monetize outside of what I already have going, which is my program, the Self-Love Diet, which really encompasses everything we've talked about on this show and all of my beliefs. If you don't love yourself or you're listening to this and you're like, wow, I really enjoy what Paul's talking about, like I would highly encourage you to apply for the Self-Love Diet. It's a group program, which means that you have a group of people going through it at the same time. You have 6 months with calls with me. I also have an amazing team of coaches that step in and do accountability calls. We have a milestone tracker where you get rewarded for doing the work. And it's all on this private app off of social media. So you can feel safe, like really vulnerably being you. The flagship program that I created, and as it evolved, it's really what's beautiful. And to be completely vulnerable and authentic right now, something I'm excited about is I've started doing consulting in the short form video content strategy space, like working with brands who want to come onto TikTok, who want to dive deeper into Reels, just because I have such a creative mind that really excites me. And I'm kind of like dancing between how do I maintain all of this love that I have for helping people and also this business that is starting to take off when I never really expected it to. And the opportunities that I'm having just to creatively help people reach new audience has been really fun. Between like the relationship content on TikTok and growing that, and I'm working on this document called the First Date Files, which basically is just like a swipe file for text messages for questions to ask on the dating apps and first dates to avoid things like getting ghosted and choosing partners that are going to bond with you traumatically and stuff like that. That's going to be like an easy thing for people to reference because I've tried it all and the past stuff hasn't worked. So it worked at once. It's not working anymore, which means that I get to evolve. So I'm kind of in like this weird space right now where I'm not going to turn anyone away from the self-love diet. And it's not like my only focus, which feels weird to say. Like, I feel like I've just deterred everyone from wanting to go apply.
No, if you're listening and that resonates with you, absolutely apply. I feel like it sounds incredible. And it's cool that you're transparent about it because that's what life is, right? A continual evolution, a continual checking in with yourself, seeing what works, what doesn't work. Life changes happen and just, pivoting with that. And I'm really happy and excited to hear that you are using your creativity because you are such a creative person and you can tell. And it's like, I'm really excited to see where you end up landing or continuing down the path on. And actually, again, it leads to the next question that I wanted to ask is, on the good space, like our mission is to provide a calm space for people to connect within, heal, and regain their inner peace. And then one of my personal biggest goals is to show that you can grow a business while still taking care of yourself. And you seem to be doing that quite successfully. And so from what I gather, what you shared, is it more just like you check in with yourself and you're like, ooh, this is no longer working. So now I'm in a phase of discovery. I'm playing, I'm being more like, would you say there's more to it than that? Or how? Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts.
I think that I had to be dragged kicking and screaming into that understanding since 2020. Like the pandemic just swooped in and ripped all of my abundance mentality out from underneath me, like a lot of us, like most of us. And ever since then, I've just been trying to get by in my business, like client to client, month to month. I'd feel successful if I could pay my rent. And this is something that's like really, what's the word that I'm looking for? I have to be gentle with myself saying that, because I feel like, okay, you look at me on Instagram. Oh, he has 26,000 Instagram followers. It's a top 100 podcast. He must be raking in the dough. Girlfriend, it has been dry over here. And that's really, this like mindset approach here is that it's all my fault. It's all my fault. Like in this the coaching space, like mindset, if your business is successful, it's your mindset. It's your fault. It's your wrong. It's your problems. It's your problems. And I'm like, yes, I believe that. But man, I would beat myself up and I would continue trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, which is insanity. And it wasn't working. And because of that, the only thing that my body could do to convince me is to give me a debilitating rash that brought me to my knees. There were some days where I couldn't walk because it was so painful. Most nights I couldn't sleep. And I am so grateful because it has taught me so much about sacrificing myself. I told myself that the second that I can actually fully move again, the second I can actually walk out and not worry about people like my face getting dry or whatever, I am never, ever going to say no to the things that I want to do. And this has been like such a journey. It's really scary because at the end of December, I had a bill due to my podcast editor that I couldn't pay. I had rent coming up. I'd already asked my parents for money. My partner was just like, no, I can't support your business any longer. You have to figure this out, Paul. At the end of December, I had to ask my Instagram community if they would donate to my healing journey. And here I am a month later, still kind of in the same like financial spot, being like, okay, something's got to change. Something's got to give. And granted, here's the interesting thing too, Francesca. I keep on getting applications to work with me one-on-one, which is like an even larger investment than the self-love diet. And I'll get on the discovery call with the person. They'll be all in. They'll be like, I'm going to submit the payment tomorrow. And then they either ghost me or they don't make a payment. And this is something that a lot of us grow through in our businesses. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, why is this happening? Because that is all this money that I expect to receive. I can breathe and be like, oh, I'm going to be able to pay my rent this month. And it doesn't happen. And I'm like, okay, what is the universe trying to tell me? So there's a couple of things that I've come down to that I'm actually like really battling with right now, because I have 2 more one-on-one discovery calls coming up this week that I'm just meant to burn the bridge. I'm meant to dive headfirst into this creative consulting. And that's terrifying because what am I supposed to do with this Instagram following and TikTok following that I've built talking about self-love? Am I just going to all of a sudden start talking about content creation? What am I supposed to do with this podcast that I loved so much and have interviews scheduled with Spirit Daughter, Gabby Bernstein, like big names that I would have never thought I would get to interview. But I'm like, I don't even have the means to pay my editor to edit the podcast, and I don't want to edit it myself. So am I supposed to call Gabby Bernstein and be like, hey, I'm not going to interview you anymore? Like, am I supposed to do that? Like this is really what I'm battling with right now, because if I were to hold on to this old stuff, not saying that the old stuff is bad. And my husband, who came from like a childhood that was like, never knew where the next dollar was coming from, really struggles with me just like letting go of the past business piece. But I feel like there's part of me that just has to do that. But at the same time, like that's really, really risky and really scary. But what's worse, like having someone say yes and then them ghosting me the next day, or saying, oh, actually, the long-term payment plan is too much for me, I can't do it anymore. And me being like, well, okay, I know you're using money as an excuse, but whatever, it's not an actual reason. And then getting mad at myself, or just like doing it, like, so that's really where I am. And I'm really grateful for you holding space for me to share all of that. And I think that there's a lot of people that can relate. And I don't know what's going on right now. All I'm doing is following my joy, which right now is creating content on TikTok and basically being silent on Instagram because I don't know where Instagram fits into my life anymore. And that's okay. That's really okay. And also just like, there's a lot.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that because I have absolutely felt similar and do feel similar emotions of like what's worth focusing on or not focusing on or letting go. And I mean, I feel like after this, we should definitely talk because I have way more to say, but probably don't need to share everything on here. But I think the key thing is that you said you're following your joy, and that's where abundance happens the fastest, is when you are having fun, when you are aligned with that joy. So I know that you're heading the right direction. But of course, there's that pressure to like bring in money and be able to afford all these things. But like, honestly, I hope that one day you're going to look back at this interview and be like, oh, that's where I was. And now I'm like where I'm supposed to be and things are just flowing and working out. And I mean, I have thoughts on like what you could do with like TikTok and all those things, and we could chat about it, but I'm just like so excited for you. And I know it's scary and I can see it's scary, but you're definitely on the right path. And so in addition to the good space, I do copywriting for brands and big brands, small brands, entrepreneurs, and I have felt that as well. But I realized that once I just let go of the outcome and I'm like, cool, like you just choose whatever you want to do. Honestly, like most people are like, I want to work with you now. I'm not saying this will work all the time, but I noticed that the more I disconnected from the outcome, the more people like wanted to like keep moving forward. And I don't know if it's the same with coaching, obviously, but I feel like you are definitely targeted in the right direction. And sometimes it can be hard because like my husband also, he just sees me investing in things and he doesn't get it fully, but he's just like, okay, I trust you, but like, you have to take care of it. So I'm sure you feel that too, where it's like you have this partner and this life partner that you feel like almost responsible to show that it's like paying off or that it's working. And so that can feel like a lot of pressure.
I'm no longer allowed to invest in anything. I mean, that's not 100% true, but it's thank you for sharing that. And that resonates really deeply with me. And it's pretty similar in the coaching world. I would say that it's, rejection is protection all the time. And really where I'm leaning into is like, is this just the universe testing me to be like, yeah, you could have it easy. Coaching people one-on-one is so easy for you, Paul. You're so good at it. You get results almost instantly. And if it doesn't bring you joy, why are you still doing it? And that's not true. It does bring me joy. What doesn't bring me joy is the call, dealing with the money, the contracts, all that kind of stuff. None of that brings me joy. But helping people, man, I would help people all day long if I was independently wealthy.
100%. Well, I feel for you so much. I totally relate to that. Okay, so just to wrap everything up, can you let us know a book that you're currently reading or that's at the top of your to-read list?
Yes. Okay, but let me find out who the author is so that we can definitely, because I'm listening to it on Audible right now and it's changing my game. Okay, it's called Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott. And it is so good because basically, and it's kind of embodying everything that we've talked about, like based upon the subject matter that having is in response to wanting. So everything in your life that you have, there's a piece of you that wants it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And how to heal this through really getting turned on by the concept that like, ooh, I love being in scarcity. It makes me feel so good having no money. Yes, that fear, that adrenaline rush, God, it just turns me on. Like, and it's really, really interesting. Finding joy in the bad stuff has been really soothing for me. So I highly recommend the book.
So it's basically like making sure you're in high energy no matter which way things are swinging. It's kind of like, I'm going to feel good and have good energy regardless. So I love that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like I get off on being codependent. Like I love being in a codependent relationship. And this is where then I can admit to myself, I don't personally, that was just like an example, but it's like, I can admit to myself that like not knowing how I'm going to pay my rent fuels me to find ways to pay my rent and really pushes me to hustle. But it's also really bad for my nervous system and really bad for my rash that needs me to live the least stressed out life ever. So I really enjoy the book and I would definitely recommend it.
Well, we will make sure to link it. And also, if someone listening wants to connect with you more and find you, where can they find you?
So you can DM me on Instagram. I think that's still the best place to have a conversation. And that's my name at Paul Fishman. You can also head to my website, paulfishman.love. And in there and in my Instagram bio, you can click the contact link and my email's there. And then I would definitely recommend following me on TikTok at paul.fishman because just have a lot of fun over there. And I think that I give away a lot of value and in ways that resonate with a lot of people. Resonance is kind of my gift.
I love it. Well, we'll definitely link everything that you've shared. And so it'll be easy. So just go to the show notes of whatever app you're listening and you can connect with him. And Paul, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation. Now it's time for an affirmation. I create space mentally and emotionally for unconditional self-love to be my guiding light. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.